one time, whenever Dad went on a trip with sports, and he was always going on trips because every place you played, because Wyoming is so outspread, was a trip away from home for all the away games, and I didn't go to all those games with him. Once in a while I did the closer ones. And then if they had a district tournament, they were gone for a week. And besides all the playing, Dad and Kay Robinson decided they wanted to officiate basketball. Neither one of them had ever done it, but they got together and studied the officials' manual, learned all the rules, and devised a plan where the two of them would work together. And maybe officials do this regularly, I don't know, but those two always work together. If Dad was watching one thing, Kay was watching something else. And they became very, very good officiators, very much respected and very much in demand. So that supplemented our income, because the pay that they paid the basketball officiators was, I don't know how much, but it was a nice amount. But they got mileage, so many cents a mile for traveling, so that was a lucrative side job for Dad that he could do while he was involved with athletics anyhow. And they would officiate at district and state tournaments, and so whenever he went on a trip, he got out the door and 5 minutes later I had the kids packed and in the car, and I went to one or the others. More often when it was just me, I would go to visit Mama. And one winter day, and you never stayed home because of bad weather and snow, because there was bad weather and snow the whole time. Just to back up for a minute, I was coming home from Auburn teaching school one day in the snow, and I slid off the road and down into the briar pit the snow just covered up my windshield. I just didn't hurt anything, didn't hurt the car. And a big milk truck was traveling right behind me. He hardly said a word. He got out his chains, pulled me out, and got me headed down the road again, and he took off. That's the way life was in the wintertime with the snow. So anyhow, when Dad left for this one ball trip, I gathered up Reed and Karen. They were tiny. And we were taking care of a little dog, toy Pomeranian, that belonged to Clarence Gunnell and family. And they had asked us to take care of the dog for a while for them. And got the kids loaded in the car. I always had the studded snow tires on the car, that they're illegal now, but they would, the studs, like a nail that goes in, would help grip in ice and heavy snow. And I didn't even get out of the valley. I just got on my way well, and realized I was in the middle of a real full-blown blizzard. And it was just a 2-lane highway, you know, 1 lane each direction. But there wasn't a lot of traffic because there weren't a lot of people in Wyoming, and about the only place to go on that road was to Jackson or to go down into Idaho. But the snow plows had snowed, or had plowed the roads, and the snow was backed up on each side of the highway above the height of the car. And so I had this little tunnel almost that I was driving, and I knew that I was in the middle of a bad storm, but I was not terribly skilled at driving. And I thought, what if I try to turn around and go back home and get stuck crosswise? And then with all this snow, nobody will see me, and somebody will come and hit me. And so I just kept going. I could hardly see. I rolled down the window to try to discern which was the snow that was packed up here, where was the road, the highway that was snow-covered, and here's all this snow coming down. And I just said my prayer and kept going with my little kids and the dog, and finally got to Mother's. Mother didn't know when I was coming, and found out that in retrospect, that was the worst snowstorm of the winter. And like angels take care of mamas and kids, that's what happened. My mother was beside herself when she realized I'd been in that storm. And my cousin Jimmy, who was a salesman for storm doors and windows, had been in the other end of the valley, the end where you would be heading for Soda Springs, and he got caught in that storm, and his battery died, and he was stranded. He had a terrible time. And here I am at the other end of the valley going to Rigby and making it through with my little family. So that was life in Afton. One other funny thing, I'm sorry I tell you so many things, but we had a program that was held in the high school auditorium, and it must have been all these 4-H clubs, all the little children's groups that were having this evening program, and some way or other I was in charge of the whole thing. And I always barreled through and did whatever. If I'd never done something before, I was never intimidated. I had, I think, a fair amount of self-confidence in that respect. But the night, and our little 4-H group, I had a little skit that I didn't originate it, but I had availability to it, and they gave that, and that was cute, and that was our part. But we had an MC and everybody doing these things, but I wanted to go to the high school early to make sure everything was set up and ready to go since I was in charge. And so I went by myself because the kids were all coming with their parents. I must have gotten a sitter for Reed and Karen because I didn't have them with me that night. But people, they didn't parallel park, they, what do you call it, vertical parking? Mm-hmm. That's the way people parked. And I was coming, and I was the very first car there. Nobody else was at the high school. Maybe a janitor or something was parking right behind. And I poked, let's see, it usually goes like this, I think, at that angle. And I was the first one, and I parked the wrong angle. I knew it was wrong, but I didn't think about it. I parked that way, and so every car that came after me parked at the same angle that I did. Every one of us got a ticket. And I never did confess that I was the one that started it all, but I had to go before a judge, and I think he either charged me a little or nothing, because he had a whole row of cars, but the policeman thought, what's going on there? They're all parked at the wrong angle, and I was the guilty party, and I never fessed up so that people would know it was me.